She called after abandoning me at the bar in front of friends, saying, "You know I love you," but I could barely hear her over the ringing in my ears. It all started innocently enough, an evening out with friends, drinks flowing, laughter filling the air. Her smile was as radiant as ever, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. But as the night wore on, something shifted. She grew distant, her eyes flickering with unease whenever I tried to engage her in conversation. I thought it was just the alcohol, but then she disappeared. One moment she was by my side, and the next she was gone. At first, I assumed she'd stepped outside for a breath of fresh air or gone to the bathroom, but as the minutes passed, panic began to settle in. I checked with everyone around, but no one had seen her leave. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. I stayed by the bar, trying to play it cool, but my heart was racing. My friends tried to make light of it, suggesting she might just be upset about something trivial. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then, an hour later, I received a call. It was her. I picked up, desperate for an explanation, but all she said was, "You know I love you." The words came out rushed, as though she had rehearsed them 1,000 times. My chest tightened as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Why had she left me there, in front of everyone? Why hadn't she at least come back to explain? "Where are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What's going on?" There was a long silence before she responded, her voice now cold and detached. "I just needed space. I needed to figure some things out." It wasn't the answer I had hoped for, and it didn't feel like the truth. The confusion, the hurt, and the humiliation all mixed together as I stood there, feeling abandoned. The bar, once a place of laughter, now felt like a cage. My friends had scattered, no longer concerned about the sudden disappearance of the woman who was supposed to be with me. They all left, leaving me to sit there alone, waiting for some kind of explanation that never came. Days passed, and I tried to reach out, but she was distant, her texts short, her calls nonchalant. It wasn't until a week later that I found out the truth. She had been seeing someone else, someone she'd met earlier in the night at a different bar. It wasn't a coincidence that she disappeared. She had gone to meet him, and I had been nothing more than an afterthought. I couldn't believe it. The love she had claimed to have for me, the affection she had so easily expressed, was all a lie. She had abandoned me without a second thought, and then, when the damage was done, she had the audacity to call me and tell me she loved me. But now, I realized that love wasn't enough. Not when it was laced with betrayal. The realization hit me like a cold slap to the face. All those moments we shared, the inside jokes, the way she looked at me like I was the only one in the room, none of it meant a thing. It had been a facade, a mask she wore until she could find something, or someone better. She had left me hanging at the bar, humiliated in front of my closest friends, not because she needed space or time to think, but because she had already made her choice. And it wasn't me. I spent the following days in a haze, replaying everything in my mind, questioning every conversation, every touch. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? There had been whispers of her coldness for weeks, subtle changes in how she treated me. But I had been too caught up in the idea of us to see the truth. Now it was all so painfully clear. I tried to move on, to distance myself from her and the hurt she had caused, but it wasn't easy. She still reached out, sporadically, sending me messages with those same familiar, empty words, "I love you," or "I miss you," as though nothing had changed, as though everything could be fixed with a few simple texts. But every time I read them, the sting of what she had done was all I could focus on. The love she claimed to have for me wasn't real. It was a tool to manipulate and soften the blow of the truth. Eventually, I stopped responding. No more late-night texts, no more answering her calls. I had given her enough chances to explain, enough chances to make things right. But she hadn't tried to fix anything. She had only tried to erase the damage by pretending nothing had happened. I remember the day I finally ran into her again. It was at a coffee shop of all places. She was sitting with a group of friends, laughing, her eyes sparkling with the same energy they used to when she was with me. When she saw me, there was a brief flicker of recognition, But then she turned her attention back to the conversation at hand, as if I were a stranger. Her indifference cut deeper than anything she could have said. She didn't approach me. She didn't try to apologize or explain. She didn't even acknowledge the hurt she'd caused. And I realized then that her love was never mine to have. It had been someone else's all along, someone she had found after leaving me in the dust. That was the moment I truly let go. I didn't need her words anymore. I didn't need the false comfort of hearing "I love you" when it meant nothing. It was time to reclaim my own heart, to stop waiting for an apology or some grand gesture that would never come. The truth had been right in front of me, and finally, I was free to see it. I walked out of that coffee shop, the weight on my chest lighter than it had been in months. I was done. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I spent the next few days in a fog, trying to piece together the shards of what had been my relationship with her. The more I thought about it, the more the signs had been there, small things I'd brushed off as quirks, as harmless moments. The texts she'd ignored, the way she'd start conversations but never really follow through, her eyes sometimes lingering on other people when we were out together. I should have seen it coming, but I had refused to believe it. I had trusted her, believed in the idea of us. But reality had a way of crashing down on you when you least expected it. When the truth came out, I felt like a fool. She hadn't just abandoned me at the bar. She had been planning to leave me all along. The man she'd met that night was someone she'd been talking to for weeks, someone who had been slowly taking the place of the guy I thought I was. She had been setting things in motion, stringing me along with the words I wanted to hear until the moment she felt ready to pull the trigger. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to admit how deeply she had lied, how much she'd played with my feelings. So I kept asking her, kept trying to get some sort of closure that made sense of everything. The more I pressed, the more she pushed back. Her apologies felt hollow, her explanations rehearsed. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she'd say, her voice thick with the kind of forced sincerity you can only muster when you've already made up your mind. "I care about you, I really do. But I think we both know it wasn't right." What did that even mean? We both knew? No, she knew, and I had been too blind to see it. One evening, I finally found the courage to confront her in person. I showed up at her apartment, a mixture of anger and sadness churning inside me. I wasn't sure what I wanted. Answers, a chance to speak my mind, maybe just a final moment of clarity that would help me understand how everything had gone so wrong. When she opened the door, she looked like a different person. The familiar spark in her eyes was gone, replaced with something more distant, almost cold. She stepped aside to let me in, but the warmth I had once felt in her presence was gone. She didn't offer me a drink, didn't ask me to sit down. She just stood there, waiting. "I found out about him," I said, the words coming out sharp, almost accusatory. "You've been seeing someone else. For weeks, right? This whole time, I didn't want it to happen like this." She cut me off, her voice trembling slightly, but there was no real regret in her eyes. "It wasn't fair to you. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how to. I didn't want to hurt you." I stared at her, a lump in my throat. "And you think this is the way to not hurt me? You've been lying to me this whole time. You abandoned me at the bar in front of my friends, and then you have the nerve to call me and say you love me." "I do love you," she said, the words coming out like a whisper. But it wasn't enough. Not enough to make it work. We wanted different things. I laughed, though it didn't feel like laughter. "You don't get to pull that on me. Not after everything. This wasn't about wanting different things. This was about you lying to me, using me while you were already planning your escape." Her face hardened for a moment, and then she blinked, taking a deep breath. "You're right. It was wrong. But it's over now, and there's nothing more to say. You'll be okay. You'll move on." Her calm, detached tone made me feel even more foolish. She'd already made peace with the situation, already moved on mentally and emotionally, even if I still felt like I was stuck in the middle of it, drowning in unanswered questions and a crushing sense of betrayal. I could feel my own anger rising, but it wasn't the anger I thought I'd have. It wasn't rage or fury. It was a numbness, a hollow, aching emptiness that told me I was losing someone who had meant the world to me. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. "I don't know who you are anymore," I finally said, my voice low but steady. "The person I thought you were? She's gone. And I don't think I can keep doing this. I can't keep pretending like nothing happened, like you didn't just rip my heart out." She nodded, but there was no apology, no real regret in her eyes anymore. "I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I really am." But in that moment I knew. Sorry wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I turned and walked out of her apartment without looking back. I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need her to apologize again. The truth had already hit me, and no amount of words could change it. She had chosen someone else, and I was left in the wake of her decisions. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I realized something. Love doesn't always save you. Sometimes it leaves you, and you're left to pick up the pieces on your own. And I would. I didn't know how, but I would. Because no one was coming to save me anymore. It was time to save myself.